Hello, friends. I'm Alan Fadling, and you're listening to the Unhurried Living Podcast, where we inspire you to rest deeper, live fuller, and lead better. If you've been in Christian leadership for any length of time, you've probably felt the pull to do more, be more, prove more. But sometimes we mistake that drivenness for faithfulness, when in reality it's subtly draining our souls. We can end up tired in ways that a day off just can't fix. And so in this episode, we'll explore the difference between the kind of work that's energized by grace and love and the kind that's fueled by insecurity, fear, or the need to please. We'll talk about holy rhythms of work and rest and how to return to the easy yoke of Jesus. If you're tired of running on empty, there's an invitation here to lead from rest rather than from rush. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm glad you found us. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. The other day, I was interviewed for a podcast. We were talking about situations when the good work that we do, or at least the way we do it, isn't good for our souls. We can find ourselves under the illusion that we're working for God when we're actually being driven by something or someone else. One of our aims at Unhurried Living is helping leaders discern the difference between grace and grind. I recently read a story in the Desert Fathers that helps us here. There was an older man talking with two younger men who were struggling to break down a large rock. Here's the conversation. "My brother," the old man said, "what is this work you are doing?" "We are struggling with this extremely hard rock and we can barely manage to break it." "You are right to say we," the old man remarked. "For you have not been alone in tackling it. There was someone else with you, someone you did not see, someone who was not so much helping you as viciously driving you on." This dialogue comes in the context of a conversation about the schemes of the enemy of our soul. These young men likely thought that their drivenness was virtuous work, but this elder discerns that they were being driven by the devil. See, workaholism is like this. In the end, it's driven by the bad intentions of our soul's adversary. It does us harm. The tasks accomplished by workaholism do not bear kingdom fruit. They drive us to exhaustion. And so we need to learn how to discern this in our lives and in our work. There's a great difference between hard work energized by grace and love and exhausting toil driven by insecurity or anxiety or people-pleasing. Eugene Peterson spoke about what I'm describing as the difference between grace-energized work and soul-draining drivenness. In a collection of his essays called Subversive Spirituality, there's an interview in which Peterson is asked, "How does busyness affect our spiritual lives?" Here is Peterson's answer. Busyness is the enemy of spirituality. It's essentially laziness. It is doing the easy thing instead of the hard thing. It's filling our time with our own actions instead of paying attention to God's actions. It is taking charge, end quote. Peterson suggests that, quote, busyness has nothing to do with activity, and spirituality is not the absence of activity. You either enter into what God is doing or you don't. A busy person is a lazy person because they are not doing what they are supposed to do. Listen now to the example that Peterson offers from his experience as a pastor. He says, "The elder in your church who goes to all the meetings, runs all the committees, and as a result does not take care of his kids or his wife is not doing what he is supposed to be doing. Everyone, including the pastor, thinks this elder is wonderful, but his wife and children don't think it's so wonderful. So there's a sort of busyness, according to Peterson, that's really laziness rather than good activity. That's a participation in what God is doing. And so again, there's a difference between holy activity, good work, and unholy drivenness. Mindless busyness does not bear good fruit. It's doing the easy, urgent thing rather than taking time to discover what really matters in a particular moment. That sort of thing cannot be done in a hurry. In the end, workaholism is always too busy for God. Too busy to walk with God, too busy to work with God, just too busy. We must slow down, mostly on the inside, to join in with what God is doing. Being unhurried is not about being sluggish. Unhurried work actually is often quick to respond. I just think we are too easily impressed by the leader who is doing a lot of important-looking things for God while their family suffers their absence or their health suffers as a result. Too often, workaholism is rewarded in our culture, even in churches and nonprofit organizations. That same impulse drives an awful lot of work initiative and activity. How can it bear good fruit if it isn't an expression of abiding in Jesus? The other day, I was reflecting on this image of Jesus as the true vine, and we as branches connected to him, abiding in him. And I was imagining what a false vine might be like. I imagined that a false vine turns the tables on the branch and begins sucking life from it rather than giving life to it. What a monstrous thing that would be to see in a vineyard. But that's really the very sort of thing workaholism does. In his book, New Seeds of Contemplation, Thomas Merton talks about this when he says, unnatural, frantic, anxious work done under pressure of greed or fear or any other inordinate passion, cannot, properly speaking, be dedicated to God because God never wills such work directly. He may permit that through no fault of our own, we may have to work madly and distractedly due to our sins and to the sins of the society in which we live. In that case, we must tolerate it and make the best of what we can't avoid. But let's not be blind to the distinction between sound, healthy work and unnatural toil. End quote. See, this happens in me when I imagine that finances are the bottom line of my work, or when I work as though my identity depended on the outcome, rather than being rooted in God and expressed in my work. I become driven in my work when I focus my attention more on what is proving challenging or less successful than I hoped, and less on the God who always does good work and is doing good work right now in me and around me. So, workaholism can be unintentionally applauded in Christian leadership circles, but when the branch is drained by what it's attached to, rather than nourished by it, something is terribly off. As I draft this monologue, Jam and I are just a couple of weeks past our annual July mini sabbatical. We've built times of quiet reflection into our days, our weeks, our months, and now our years for over 40 years of ministry work now. Our rule of life is like a tree we planted in our young adulthood that has continued to grow and develop. Now, these times away, these Sabbath-like times, are an intentional stepping away from the usual pressures and pings. And I often find myself wondering when I come back to work from these Sabbath spaces, can this grace-filled focus come home with us? Or will it get swallowed up by busyness again? With practice, we're getting better at bringing a more restful soul back into the intense activity of our ministry work. We keep learning how to make small, sustainable shifts, what you might call gentle experiments in living and working differently. So, for example, I've cultivated a work rhythm where email and internet do not get the first word of my day. I let my iPhone, at least the internet-connected part of it, rest until about mid-morning. I resist letting my email or messaging be omnipresent to me. It's also been good for Jim and me, since we work at home, to eat our breakfasts and our dinners together. I'm sure that's already a habit for many of you, but we easily slipped into the habit of eating in our offices and being sometimes distracted rather than focused there. When we eat together, we get to share our lives and talk a bit about our work. And we often walk around our 3/4 mile block after we eat. More opportunities to share our lives. We've also sought for a while now to practice a weekly Sabbath from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. We seek to mark our weeks not just by productivity, but also by rhythms of rest. A Sabbath isn't mostly a break from work, but rather a way of doing our work a little slower with a little more trust and joy. None of this is about being perfect or finally figuring it all out. We take just one small step at a time. Simple, sustainable, joyful even. We're not trying to build a system. We're trying to listen. And we tune our ears to what the Spirit is saying about how we work, how we rest, how we live together in this shared calling. Can we find the fruitfulness that flows from abiding, not striving? Because the point isn't just better boundaries, it's deeper trust. It's about living what we're learning so that what we offer others comes from the overflow of the good things God is doing in us. The vision of good work that I'm trying to cast for you is a long journey and not a quick fix. We are not computer programs to be hacked. We are persons made in the image of God who will live eternally. Evelyn Underhill talked about this sort of foundation for our work when she said, quote, "I feel more and more convinced that only a spirituality which thus puts the whole emphasis on the reality of God, perpetually turning to Him, losing itself in Him, refusing to allow even the most pressing work or practical problems, even sin and failure, to distract from God. Only this is a safe foundation for spiritual work." End quote. Evelyn Underhill is saying that we need a profound orientation to the real presence of God with us to serve as the foundation of our work. If we are not deeply rooted and well oriented to the reality of God who is always with us, we will never be able to serve as selflessly as God wishes. This is what living and working prayerfully looks like. We learn to develop habits rooted in peace, in joy, and in love that gradually displace habits rooted in anxiety, escapism, or people-pleasing. In my own leadership life, I long for my habits of anxiety to be displaced by habits of peace, not by willpower, but as the fruit of deeper communion with the God who loves me. In experience, This looks like building good habits of personal prayer and reflection that enrich and encourage my heart so that I work in God's presence, empowered by God's Spirit. The classic way of describing this dynamic is the interplay between our contemplative life and our active life, between our life of prayer and our life of service, between our inner life and our outer life. These are not two different, unrelated things, but two interrelated realities. All of this is a way of saying that our work is meant to be an expression of the goodness God is giving us in our lived experience of Him. At its best, there is a simplifying that happens when we do this well. I love something Eugene Peterson once wrote about this reality. He said, quote, "I want to simplify your lives. When others are telling you to read more, I want to tell you to read less. When others are telling you to do more, I want to tell you to do less. The world does not need more of you. It needs more of God. Your friends do not need more of you. They need more of God. And you don't need more of you. You need more of God." To be clear, Peterson is speaking as a pastor to his readers, many of whom may also be pastors. He is not demanding that they do more than they are already doing. In a sense, he wants them to follow the spirit of John the Baptist when he says, "He must increase, but I must decrease." This is the sense in which the world needs less of me and, perhaps through me, more of God. The world, my friends, and even I myself need more of God and not more of myself. This is so contrary to the sort of self-expression instinct that's so strong today. It seems to me akin to the temptation of Adam and Eve in the garden. "You will be like gods," was the message of the tempter. But I don't need to be a star. There's not much good in seeking my own glory. I don't need to make a name for myself. There is no name for me better than the one God has already given me. If I shine, it's the reflected light of God with me, God in me. I find the gracious spirit of this counsel very freeing. There's a part of me that thinks that growing spiritually, though, means adding more activities and more engagements and more commitments to my life. But there is a sense of simplifying and focusing that comes when we live in a holy rhythm of work and rest, of leadership and prayer, of fruitfulness and rootedness. So, where do we go from here? Maybe you could pause once a day and ask yourself a simple question. Am I now being driven in my work, or am I being led by God in my work? Notice what you feel in your body as you ask such a question. Pay attention to your thoughts. Let that question lead you back to Jesus, who keeps on saying to us, "Come to me. My yoke is easy. My burden is light." You don't need to fix everything at once. Just take one small step toward a gentler rhythm. Let grace set the pace. And in that slowing, may you find yourself more present to God, more present to others, and more present to the good work you've been given. Thank you for listening to the Unhurried Living Podcast. To learn more about us, visit unhurriedliving.com. In the show notes, you'll find helpful links and information about our partners, Life Audio, and all of their other faith-centered podcasts.